It's about running your agency as efficiently as you possibly can and being strategic about how you are investing inside your agency.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
I am having a great Monday, Lindsay. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Last week I don't want to say I fell off the bandwagon, but I didn't go to my morning workouts. I didn't necessarily eat the best. I had like a week reset. I was reading some really good books over the weekend last weekend and didn't do any of my weekend routine, and that flowed into the week last week. So it is a good Monday. I've got my house clean. All my meals are prepped. I've got, we actually went grocery shopping and went to my morning workout class. So I'm feeling so much better this week than I was last week. I'm like on the right track. It's amazing how just a little bit of prep on your Sunday can help you feel just a whole lot better during the week, right?
Yeah, we're getting ready to have a team meeting in Hilton Head, and I've been doing some preparation for that, and it's allowed me to reflect on the year and also plan for next year. And I feel the same way. Like when I'm able to pause and, look at some lessons learned for the past year as well as plan for the next, I feel so much more prepared than when I'm just going through the motions and my head is down and I'm working inside the business. And honestly, we did the same thing. We actually intended to get outside because it's October and it's beautiful outside. So get outside as much as possible. So I've hit my step goal every single day recently, which is awesome, rather than
Nice.
sitting at my desk and not getting any movement. So it's
Mhm.
amazing what that does for your whole demeanor when you start your day with a plan versus starting it with oh boy, I'm behind,
Yeah, I feel like my head is so much clearer when I sit down to work on something, when I have just gone on a walk or did my morning workout. So um,
Yeah.
I'm coming into this week feeling strong. But
Yeah.
so this is going to be our first ever podcast, just us. We're not having a guest on this episode. We are just going to talk back and forth. So it's something that we've never done before. I'm super excited to dive in. The topic I wanted to discuss today is going to be strategies to grow the valuation and value of your agency. So, with my role, I have been working with quite a few agencies, and I get to talk to them about kind of like coming out of your agency and looking at a bird's eye view. What are our operation goals? What are our carrier goals? What is our overall goals for our agency and objectives to actually reach those? And a lot of them are not strategically thinking throughout the just daily monotonous work of having an agency on how to actually increase their value. So I'd love to spend some time in this episode that's just us talking about that. And that's something that you are I don't want to call you a guru, but you're like the person who knows about that in the industry. So
It's
there's
so funny that you said that.
no
Every
better
time you said
platform.
yeah, it's hilarious when you said, I don't want to call you a guru. The first thing that jumped into my mind is Morgan. She's like, no, man, she's just your mom. Like, she's not anybody. Like, it's kind of funny. Anyway,
Just
but yeah,
another person.
yeah. Anybody have children, the first thing, or anybody have someone in their house that will keep them 100% grounded. I've got one of those in my house all the time that just cannot imagine that I know anything about anything. But anyway,
Mhm. So
yes.
I want
So
to kick off with what does it actually mean to grow the value of your agency? Does it just mean write more policies? Does it mean get more carriers? What does it actually mean?
yeah, it doesn't, there are people that can actually have an incredibly valuable agency without having the most policies or the most premium. It's about running your agency as efficiently as you possibly can and being strategic about how you are investing inside your agency. So if you think about it, Lindsay, in order to run an agency, you've got to make a fair number of choices. You've got to think about who are the right customers to go after, who are the right carriers to partner with, who are what is the ideal customer that I'm going to go after? Is it personal lines? Is it commercial lines? Is it a niche? Is it all kinds of things? And by making some of these decisions, you then can determine what kind of infrastructure you want to put in place. What technology should I invest in? What processes and procedures should I put in place? But if you don't have a plan and you're writing whatever comes to you and you're reactionary, it's really hard to be efficient in that approach. So it really isn't about who can write the most policies. It's who can have the plan that creates the efficiency that allows you to do it in a profitable and repeatable way. So I think that whole idea of I'll just sell more and therefore I'll be more valuable, that's one piece of it. Volume is one piece of it, but it's definitely not all of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a big topic that comes up with that, and particularly in my work that I do, is defining a niche. So one of the things I've been talking to a lot of agencies about is they're kind of throwing their hands up and they're saying, I'm a generalist agency and I have business coming in my door. I don't have time to focus on a niche. And
Yeah.
they're getting incredibly frustrated when I tell them, actually, like, that's going to drive the value of your agency down. To just, if it comes to you, take it and never say no, never have a strategy. Um, in my opinion, that's not something that's sustainable. And also, how can you forecast and gauge if you're just saying, oh, people walk in my door and that's what I write? Well, what about when people stop walking through your door? Why
Yeah.
are people walking through your door? You can't answer those questions to be able to have confidently sell your agency. So, what are strategies that you work with or that you help agencies that are working through that process?
So building a niche is one of the ways that you can create efficiencies, because if you think about it, it helps you focus. It helps your team focus on what am I trying to market towards. It helps you focus on who are the partners that I need to develop. It sometimes is we develop the niche because these carriers are so easy to engage with, and we know what their appetite is, and we have more than one carrier that can write. So therefore, you really can get super strategic rather than having 17 different carriers we write with. We've got a core three that really like this appetite, that are competitive, that we know that we're going to be able to be successful in the type of customer that we have. It helps your team focus. It helps your talk tracks focus. Like, there's a lot of reasons why this is a good thing, but it's not all great. If you think about it, in the middle of COVID, if your niche was restaurants, it also has some risk associated with it. So you have to be strategic in what niche are we talking about and what are the risks associated with it, and round out those risks. So I'm not suggesting that an agency should be 100% niche focused. I'm saying having that niche allows a section of your agency to be incredibly efficient, and then thinking about what are the complementary niches that you might be able to add on and create that efficiency is a strategy. I was just at a conference and someone asked me, is it possible for actually the question was, in order to be profitable and valuable, do you have to be more heavy focused commercial or personal lines? And everybody in the room assumes you're going to say commercial lines agency are more profitable. It's higher premiums, less accounts, much easier. Again, that efficiency and focus is much higher than a personal lines agency. Well, the reality is, in my CFO clients, I have one client that is 100% focused on personal lines and might be the most profitable agency I've ever been around. His niche is personal lines, and it is very, very focused. They have an incredible referral sources. They've got great relationships with their referral sources. So niches are about efficiency and about predictability and focus. So it doesn't really matter what it is. I would say some are easier than others. And a niche that's well defined that is exclusive is the best, because now you've created something that no one else can write. And therefore it sets you apart than everyone else. So I that is one strategy if you want to if focus on the overall value of your agency. Because you're focusing on efficiency, it will translate to doing more with less, therefore a higher value inside your agency.
Hmm. So, one of the key terms that you keep pulling out and saying is efficiency. So, obviously, that is kind of step number two of yes, you need to write more business, but it's not just any business. You need to focus on, we're not just saying one, right? I'm not just saying, oh, you need to be the best at writing restaurants. Maybe you are great at writing restaurants, but look at the carriers who you write restaurants with. What are they also incredibly good at? And pick a
Mhm.
couple of niches for your team to focus on. But the other thing that you keep saying is efficiency. So, walk me through what optimizing your agency's efficiency looks like.
Yeah, and that could mean a lot of different things. So, if anybody has ever heard me speak or talk about this, I'm very passionate about the fact that I think the agency of today and tomorrow are the agents that can leverage relationships, data, and technology. And in order to be able to be efficient, you've got to have the right technology. You've got to be leveraging some data to tell you where to focus your time. And if you're able to do that, you'll be far more efficient than an agency that's treating every single customer exactly the same. So, number one, determine where are the things that are slowing you down inside your agency. Talk to your people. Where are they spending the most time? What is the repetitive work that they're doing? And are they doing it the same across the board, or is everyone doing it differently? And is that creating some dirty data? Is that creating stop gaps inside your agency? So, I'm an agent, I'm an owner of a business. I do not know exactly how every single person in my organization does their job. But if we all paused and asked that question and thought about what is the policy and procedure we could put in place to make it standard and efficient and the same across the board, it's going to create the same outcome. So, number one is there a technology that we could put in place in order to speed things up so it's not a human being having to do some work? Could we create a procedure in place in order to take out some redundant work that maybe doesn't need to be done? Then, it goes from there. Could we use a bot in order to do some data entry from one place to another in order to, again, minimize the work that a person has to do? Could you employ a virtual assistant to take some administrative work off of the people that have the technical knowledge to do something? That efficiency, you have to first start with what is the body of work that each person's doing. And number one, is it standardized? Number two, is it necessary? And number three, is there a way to minimize the administrative work in order to maximize the higher impact work that they're doing? There's a statistic that says that in all industries, there's at least 30% of the work that's administrative in nature. And the key is, can you find that administrative work and think about doing it differently in order to maximize the time that your highly qualified people are spending and not just doing data entry?
Yeah, so those are the things you need to do, but how are you helping agencies do that? Like, what is your common
Yeah.
recommendations of tools or resources that they use?
Well, one of the agencies that I went to was contemplating putting a VA in place. And we literally went and did a group meeting with their team to say, what is the body of work that we're doing? What are the things that you actually do multiple times a day? And we did a group exercise where we used a whiteboard and everybody wrote down the things that they did. And then they estimated how many times a day or week they did those things. And rank them high impact, low impact, or the things that they'd love to not to stop being able to do.
Mm.
And we then came up with a list of what is the body of work that we might be able to reallocate, eliminate, or retool into a different way. It cannot be done by top down. It absolutely has to be done across the organization because honestly, nobody sits next to me to know all the, inefficient things that I do, just like no one sits next to you and looks at all the inefficient things. We just do them. But when you make someone think about it and you can hear other people saying, yeah, I do duplicative entry into two different systems every single day, and it probably takes a half hour of my time. Now you can start to quantify that across the whole organization, what that means. Or I sit on hold for 30 minutes every day when I'm trying to, talk to a partner or carrier, or whatever it is. Like you could start to see the body of work and the time allocation towards that.
What kind of technology are you so that's VAs, right? What kind of
Yeah.
technology are you seeing people implement either to help track this or not have to have a human in a VA do it and kind of
Yeah.
be able to get around that?
It's funny because the time that it takes isn't just in the internal processing once you have the information. Like some of it's data entry. I have the information and I need to put it in our system in order to use it the right way. Or I need to quote and I need to put it in 10 different carrier portals in order to get the quote information. But some of it's the collection of the data. So a technology like Canopy Connect, which is the someone can actually, one of your customers can say, here, I'll go log in and give you all of my information in order to be able to start the process. So there's lots of different technologies that can be interjected into your process in order to streamline that. So whether it's getting information from the carrier or from your customer, once you have it, where do I need to put it in order to do our work? Where do I need to enter that back into a carrier portal in order to get my quote? And then therefore, how do I get it back to them and say, here's what I'm able to do for you? So it's a couple different places. You could use Adapt API in order to grab the information from the carrier downloads. You could use Gaia in order to be able to enter this information once and be able to use it in multiple places in order to get the quotes. I mean, I'm by no means an expert in all of the data that's out there. You could be using a risk advisor in a form that would allow you to capture it and be able to access that information and allow your customer to tell you that information rather than you sitting on the phone trying to write it all down. Same thing. That's the same kind of thing that Salt does. So it's a matter of where is the time being spent inside your agency and what are the tools that you can easily put in place in order to help that. The second thing is, what about just automating the process inside your agency for a renewal? It's a huge body of work in order to work renewals. Do you have automations that allow you to handle different kinds of situations differently? So if one of your customers does not have a large rate increase, which I understand is unusual today, so please don't think I'm crazy, but let's say, it's less than a 20% rate increase, everything else stayed the same, that might actually go through an automated message that your CRM reaches out and does that renewal process without a human being calling them. As soon as it's over 20%, that might mean you're going to pull the information and be able to shop if there's any other options for them in order to minimize that rate increase and make sure, and then be able to provide to them, hey, listen, we did shop this account to see if there's any other options. Or it could be it's an automatic phone call. This is too large of a change. There's too much of changing inside your account. But that allows your account manager or your CSR to not have to treat everybody exactly the same, creating efficiency and prioritization of the work. So there's lots of different ways to think about this. But again, it's not a one size fits all. The reason there's so many insurtechs out there and so many options is because depending on the makeup of your agency, If you are a personal lines heavy agency, salt's a great option for you. If you're a commercial lines heavy agency, maybe salt isn't a great option for you. I'm not picking on salt, but my point is there's lots of different options out there. You got to know what works. Can't just go to a conference and hear a whole bunch of agencies talking and raving about one product and think that it's going to work perfectly inside your agency. You might not have carriers that'll interact with that technology. You might not have an agency management system that integrates with that technology. And you certainly might not have the makeup of the book that's required for that technology to work. And I think we do a little bit of shiny new toy things and hear someone like me talk on a podcast or anybody talk on a podcast about something that's working inside an agency and think that it's a plug and play. It's not always the case, right?
Nope, not at all. So the last kind of bucket that I feel like we're missing, I could be completely wrong that we're missing 5 more buckets, but the last like huge bucket I feel like we're missing is optimizing your book of business that you have with your carriers. So your contingencies, negotiating higher commissions, things like that. What are some strategies that you use in the carrier relations type of sector of the industry to help agencies increase their value?
Well, I don't know that agency focus as a whole, this is a thing that we do, but there are agents that are part of networks that are very, very good at doing this because they have the tools available to them to optimize their book. So for instance, I have some agents that are part of networks that leverage agency KPI, where they're able to actually see where other agents are placing a certain risk. If they have something that they're not used to writing, they can actually look across the network where other agents are placing that risk and being able to, rather than going on a Facebook group and saying, "Hey, I need help with this. Who writes this?" They can
Mm.
actually look at their own data across their network and see where people are placing it. Um, I just presented at the Renaissance conference, and they have inside their technology to help same thing book optimization to say, hey, if these are the carriers you're using outside our preferred carriers versus inside our preferred carriers, is there an opportunity for you to maximize by rebook or replacing that book, especially when you acquire a book, being able to, once it comes into your agency management system, look and see where it's placed and are there opportunities to either increase the coverage and the benefit to the agency. So not just what benefits the agency, but what benefits the customer and what benefits the agency. Those are very, very powerful tools that can say, hey, listen, we don't want this spread all over a million different carriers. We'd love to focus and be able to maximize those relationships as long as the coverage amount makes sense. And honestly, carrier coverages and carrier appetites are changing pretty fast. So it's almost impossible to do that without the technology and the data to be able to help you do that. Maximizing your book takes a lot of time and energy. Those are two examples where I see agents that have some of these relationships have those tools at their fingertips, where agents that don't have it may not have the ability to do that very easily.
Mm. So I know I said the final bucket we were not touching on, but there is one other very large bucket that we talk about quite a lot on our podcast, which is growth by acquisition.
Mm,
So there's
yeah.
a lot of agencies who have created a strategy. We just had Bradley on. We've had other agencies on who, like John Darr, who literally their strategy for growing their agency is purchasing other agencies. That makes sense, right? It has to make sense. They're not just buying any agency who comes to them. Um, and obviously, there are a lot of different pieces of advice that we've talked about on the podcast, other pitfalls to look out for. But what's your biggest piece of advice to an agency who their ultimate goal is to increase the value of their agency and they're coming into it looking to buy agencies?
So, number one, not every acquisition opportunity is right for every buyer. just because you're adding volume doesn't mean you're actually changing the risk factors inside your agency. So don't get caught up in a trap where I have an opportunity to acquire a certain amount of premium and think that it's a, an absolute, like that's the right buy for you. You have to know your own numbers and your own agency's makeup to determine, is that the right acquisition for me? That's probably the biggest challenge, because people think I get my revenue higher. It's a multiple of revenue. So therefore, the value of my agency is going to be higher if I just add more revenue to the top line. That's one of the factors. It's 100% true. It's one of the factors. But if you add revenue that increases the risk inside your agency, a buyer's still going to discount because of the risks inside your agency. So number one, know your own numbers, know what your own risks are. And when you look at an acquisition opportunity, ask yourself, is this rounding me out, or is it literally creating more concentration in an area that I was already risky? If you do that, you're going to be far more strategic than someone who's just acquiring. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Number two, know the makeup of the book you're buying versus your own makeup. It's a It used to be you could buy a book of business trying to get a carrier that you don't have in your own mix. Well, in the middle of a hard market, carriers are less likely to extend a contract to an agency that does not already write with them. That isn't a great strategy, and sometimes people are getting tripped up because they're assuming a carrier that has extended contracts to them, or they've heard other people that have acquired in order to get a carrier. They assume that's going to happen, and then they realize that carrier will not give them the contract. They didn't put it in their due diligence. They now have a book, and they've bought a book roll rather than buying a carrier, which is a really unfortunate situation, especially in a hard market when it could be hard to place with other carriers. So please don't assume that's the case. The other thing I would say is know your own staff makeup. One of the biggest assets inside an agency is your people. And if everyone in your agency is nearing retirement age and you buy an agency where everyone also is nearing retirement age, and you think you're going to sell that agency in 3 years, the buyer's going to be a little leery if 70% of that agency is going to retire. And then what happens to those relationships? So
Mm-hmm.
you need to be really, really aware and not get super excited about adding to the top line without thinking about all the ramifications of the decisions you're making. And that list goes on and on and on. So let's say you have an agency, Lindsay, and I want to buy your agency, and everyone inside your agency is super tech forward, and my agency isn't. The culture between those two agencies are so vastly different. Not just the people that work inside the agency, but the customers are so different. Your customers might think, what the heck just happened? I stepped back in time. That's not typically how it happens. It's typically the other way
The
around. A
other
tech
way, right?
forward
Yeah.
agency is the one that's acquiring. But I I didn't feel comfortable saying that you wouldn't be more tech forward than me, obviously. My point is knowing what those, challenges are, you've got to be realistic, because the retention rate between buying a paper agency and a tech forward company buying a paper agency, that retention rate's going to be very different if those customers are used to walking in and paying cash, and all of a sudden they're doing business with an agency that's 100% online.
Hmm.
That's a non-starter, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
you got to be smart about what these, and you have to have someone who's not emotional about it be able to point these things out and maybe keep you from doing things that you would otherwise maybe get a little excited and look past. So,
hmm,
getting some advice from people that have seen these over and over and over again could be a huge benefit for someone who's making a pretty big financial decision inside their agency.
totally. One thing I'm surprised you didn't say is make sure your agency's processes are documented. You've got your shit together. Like, imagine if you didn't have your crap together, you bought an agency. That just means the mess that's created now, you're dumping more into the mess. You're going to have to bury yourself out.
True.
I think that's an incredibly important. Make sure your processes are clear, they're outlined, they're written down somewhere in a way that the new people who maybe are coming with, or the people who are currently working at your agency who may need to look at a different piece of business than they're normally used to looking at, can follow and can still do things efficiently. I think it's incredibly important.
I think the other thing I'll tell people, and people get tired of hearing me say this, I'm sure, but it's just so important. There are two numbers that make up the value of your agency, and it's not just the multiples. And everybody wants to talk about multiples. Everybody wants to get the highest multiple, get the highest this, and say like we were able to get a 12 multiple or a 14 multiple or whatever. The number that you control is your operating profit. As an owner, the number that you can manage to is that operating profit. So it's operating profit, or EBITDA, times a multiple equals the value of your agency. I would rather a super high EBITDA and a little bit lower multiple, because the outcome will still be higher than someone who is able to operate at a 19 or 20 EBITDA and still get a 14 multiple. What they don't understand is both numbers matter, and the one that you can control is that operating profit. So remember, I told you, super heavy personal lines agency, they operate somewhere around a 45 operating profit without even trying. Like they are, I joke, like they call me the fun police when we're talking about it, because they do an awful lot of swag, or things for their referral partners, and they can operate at a 45 profitability. I mean, they are fantastic at generating business, keeping their business, and their multiple will be high too. But the number that's going to be the differentiator for them is they can operate at such a high profitability that the average agency cannot. So if you don't know what your EBITDA is or what it could be, I think you're leaving money on the table. If you really want to change the value of your agency, ask yourself, all these things that I'm investing in, is it getting me closer to where I want to be? And if it's not, stop investing in it and think about it investing in a different way.
Well, I know for sure that I have enjoyed our first one-on-one episode. I'm sure there will be more to come, because we kind of grazed the surface of all of those topics when we could have gone a lot deeper. Honestly, each of them could have been their own episode. Foreshadowing, maybe? Maybe. We'll see.
Who knows? Yeah.
Who knows? But thanks to all the listeners who were tuning in to this one, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Linz.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.